The wind had settled after a long day of dust rolling across the plains, leaving the sky bruised in purple and ash. Elias Boone trudged slowly beside a sway-backed mare whose bones showed clear beneath her hide. Her name was Marigold, though the townsfolk laughed at the notion that such a tired creature could wear a flower's name. Together they came upon the inheritance he had been left, a stretch of orchard, or what once had been. The branches hung black and crooked, their bark peeling like the skin of the forgotten. Fruit lay swollen and rotten beneath them, the smell rising in the heat until Elias almost gagged. The wooden fences leaned as if ashamed, the roof of the house caved in on one side, shingles hanging loose like broken teeth. The sight stole the strength from him, for this was not just a piece of land. It was the reflection of what his own life had become. He remembered Uncle Jed Harker as a man who once laughed loud, with an orchard full of sweetness and shade. But in his last years, Jed had grown bitter, tending neither trees nor himself, drinking away his pride until death took him with little ceremony. And now Elias stood in his shadow, the town's whispers clinging to him like burrs. Boone's boy got nothing but rot. He walked among the ruined rows, running his hand along bark that split at the touch. His boots sank in soft earth damp with decay. Marigold followed quietly, her head bowed, her eyes soft with the patience of an animal who has seen many years. He tied her to a sagging post, speaking low as if the orchard might overhear. "Don't reckon they left me much, girl," he said, his voice worn thin. She answered only with a twitch of her ears. The days that followed were filled with labor that seemed hopeless. Elias mended one fence, only for another to fall. He swung the axe against dead branches until blisters burst on his hands, but the trees stood hollow, unmoved by his efforts. At night, he sat on the porch steps, shoulders slumped, watching the moonlight filter through the broken roof. The orchard was silent, except for the cicadas singing their endless song. When the flour ran out, he rode Marigold into town. The eyes of neighbors followed him as he hitched her outside the general store. Laughter drifted from the saloon, men speaking his name with derision, spitting tobacco as if to punctuate it. Sheriff Dalton Graves, broad-shouldered and deliberate, crossed his path. "Boone," the sheriff said, tilting his hat, "that orchard's more graveyard than land. Best not waste yourself trying to make a meal out of ghosts." Elias nodded, but said little. His silence seemed to confirm the judgment. Inside the store, the bell jingled as he entered. He felt the stares of two women near the shelf of flour, their whispers sharp as needles. Behind the counter, Clara Mayfield, the widow who ran the store with steady hands, looked at him with a softness that did not wound. She set a sack of flour before him without asking his coin first. "You'll pay when you can," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his just long enough to remind him he was still a man worth seeing. The words caught in his throat. He tipped his hat, mumbled a thanks, and left. Back at the orchard, the nights seemed longer. He talked to Marigold as though she were kin. He spoke of debts, of shame, of the kind of loneliness that presses on a man's chest until breathing is a task. The mare stood still beneath the trees, her ribs rising and falling like slow tides. One night, while the crickets hummed, Elias watched her paw at the earth near the orchard's edge. She scraped the soil with her cracked hoof again and again, until a small hollow showed dark against the moonlight. "Rest, girl," Elias murmured, but she would not. Days passed, and she returned to the same patch of ground, pawing stubbornly. Elias dismissed it as habit, but the thought gnawed at him. When a storm broke open the sky, lightning split the ground near the place Marigold had troubled. The rain turned the earth to mud, and in its gash he glimpsed the glint of iron, the worn edge of old wood, something buried where roots tangled deep. He stared long into that hollow, the storm dripping cold down his collar. Something stirred in him, half fear, half hope. He whispered into the orchard wind, his voice nearly lost to the storm. "There has to be more, or this land will bury me too." And with Marigold standing beside him, her eyes unblinking in the lightning's flare, Elias Boone felt the weight of a secret pressing up from the soil, waiting for his hands. At dawn the ground still shone with the night's rain. Marigold stood by the hollow she had uncovered, her hoof prints dark in the mud. Elias Boone knelt, and pressed his hand to the softened earth. Something waited there, something his uncle had hidden or forgotten. For a long while he simply breathed, afraid that if he dug he would find nothing more than stone and roots, afraid that hope might once again betray him. At last he fetched a spade. Each thrust sent clods flying, his breath misting in the cool morning air. The orchard watched in silence. The spade struck wood. He scraped the soil aside and found a circle of planks laid over stone. A well, coverings weathered and nailed down, as though someone wanted it sealed away. He pried them up, and a wet breath of air rose to meet him, cool and alive. The bucket he lowered came up full, clean water glimmering silver in the early light. His chest tightened. Beneath all this ruin, a spring still sang. Beside the well, buried deeper, his spade hit iron again. This time a chest, rusted and stubborn. He wrestled it into the open, coughing as the hinges groaned. Inside lay journals wrapped in oilskin, a few tools, and a folded map scrawled with his uncle's hand. The pages told a bitter story. Jed Harker had found the spring years ago, but had lost heart, blaming bad seasons and his own despair. He had covered it, sealed it, and drunk himself into bitterness while the orchard withered above a hidden river. Elias sat in the dirt, rainwater dripping from his hair, fury and sorrow mingling in his chest. "Why do you leave me this shame, old man?" he whispered, "when there was life yet here?" That evening Clara Mayfield came riding with a bundle balanced on her saddle. She did not ask permission, only placed the parcel on his porch. Bread, coffee, a bit of sugar wrapped in brown paper. He told her of the well, of the journals, of how his uncle had turned his back on hope. She listened in her quiet way, her eyes catching the lamplight. "Maybe he couldn't see it," she said, "but you can." Her words settled over him like a blanket. No declaration, no promise, only the kind of truth that could steady a man's hands. The days that followed bent him to their will. He dug channels through the orchard, guiding water from the spring to the trees. He cut away dead wood until piles of branches lay like bones about the yard. His palm split open, bled, healed, and split again. Marigold followed him row by row, her shadow long in the setting sun. And slowly, as if in answer, buds swelled upon the gray bark. A faint trembling of white blossoms unfurled, fragile as breath. From the town came voices sharper than thorns. At the saloon they laughed over cards. Boone's digging his own grave out there. A rival rancher rode by one day, offering coin for the land, sneering as he called it a graveyard with fences. Elias only shook his head. Some things aren't for sale. Clara bore her share of whispers too. Women at church eyed her with suspicion, tongues wagging. Why the widow lingering near a broke Boone? She never answered them. She kept coming, though, sometimes with seed, sometimes only to leave a lantern at his gate, burning against the dusk. That small light stayed with him more than any word could. Then came the frost. One night, in late spring, the air turned bitter, the stars cruelly bright. Elias felt it in his bones before he saw the whiteness creep over the orchard. The blossoms, tender and new, would not survive the cold. He lit fires among the trees, dragging wood from piles he had meant for fence posts. The flames sputtered in the dark, smoke curling among the branches. Marigold stamped nervously, breath steaming in the chill. Elias staggered from fire to fire, arms aching, his face raw from the wind. And then Clara appeared, shawl wrapped tight, her hands red with cold. She did not speak. She simply bent, took a torch from him, and helped. Together they moved through the orchard, shadows dancing across the trees. Through the long night they kept the flames alive, their faces flickering in orange light, their silence deeper than any words. At dawn, when the frost retreated, the orchard still stood. Pale blossoms shivered in the morning glow, not dead but glistening like stars that had chosen not to fall. Elias leaned against a tree, exhausted, watching Clara brush the ash from her hands. Marigold grazed quietly nearby, the guardian who had led him to life's hidden spring. Weeks passed, and the orchard's rebirth could not be denied. Small green fruit hung where rot had once clung. The townsfolk came, one by one, to see with their own eyes. Their whispers turned, not sharp now, but hushed with wonder. Sheriff Dalton himself tipped his hat, eyes lingering on the baskets of fruit carried out from the rows. Clara walked at Elias's side, not as a savior, nor as a woman making promises, but as someone who had chosen to stay when all others turned away. Her lantern no longer burned at his gate. It burned within the orchard itself, in every blossom, every piece of fruit. Elias rested a hand on Marigold's neck as children reached for apples bright as dawn. His throat ached, but this time not with shame. And if you, listening now, should ever find yourself left with nothing but ruin and rot, remember this. Sometimes beneath the soil of our despair there runs a spring waiting to be found. It may take the stubborn hoof of an old horse, or the quiet hand of someone who believes when you cannot. But if you dig, if you tend with patience, blossoms may return where the world swore none would grow. For even the most broken orchard may yet bear fruit, if given faith, fire, and gentle hands.